476 AD. A terrified boy sits on a throne in Ravenna. Outside the palace walls, Germanic soldiers pound their shields together. The empire is collapsing. The treasury is empty. The legions are gone. And within a few hours, the last emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, will be dragged from his throne. That is what happened in our world. But what if, at the very last second, Rome survived? What if the empire did not fall in 476? What if the Western Roman Empire found a way to survive the invasions, reform itself, and continue into the Middle Ages, into the Industrial Age, maybe even into our own world? Tonight, we are stepping into a different timeline, a timeline where the Roman eagle never fell. In our timeline, the Western Empire died because it was weak from every direction. The frontier was collapsing. The army no longer trusted the emperor. Corruption had poisoned the government. Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine and the Danube. And in 476, the Germanic general Odoacer overthrew the teenage Emperor Romulus Augustulus. But in this alternate timeline, one small thing changes. The year is 472. For years before the fall, a brilliant Roman general named Julius Nepos survives an assassination attempt. Instead of fleeing to Dalmatia, he marches into Italy with loyal troops from Illyria and the east. He defeats his rivals, executes the corrupt court officials in Ravenna, and takes full control of the empire. Then he does something no emperor in decades had the courage to do. He reforms Rome. The Roman army is rebuilt. Instead of relying entirely on barbarian mercenaries, Nepos grants land to Germanic tribes only if they serve directly inside the Roman military system. The Visigoths, Franks, and Burgundians are no longer outside enemies. They become Roman citizens, Roman generals, Roman governors. By 476, when Odoacer tries to rebel, he is crushed outside Ravenna. His army is destroyed. His head is sent to Constantinople. And suddenly, the Western Empire survives. For now, even though the empire survives, Europe still enters a darker age. Cities shrink. Trade slows. The population drops. But there is one huge difference. There is still a Roman state. Roads are still maintained. Taxes are still collected. Roman law still exists. The legions still patrol the borders. Instead of Europe collapsing into dozens of tiny kingdoms, most of Western Europe remains united under a weaker, but still living, Roman Empire. Gaul remains Roman. Spain remains Roman. Italy remains Roman. North Africa remains Roman. The capital slowly moves from Ravenna to Mediolanum, modern Milan, because it is closer to the northern frontiers. And over the next 200 years, Rome changes. Latin slowly evolves. The old toga disappears. Roman soldiers begin wearing chainmail and cloaks. The empire becomes more Christian, but it is still Rome. A Roman citizen in the year 700 would still recognize the empire. He would still pay taxes to an emperor, still travel on Roman roads, still call himself Roman. Meanwhile, outside the empire, the world becomes very dangerous. In the east, Persia remains powerful. In the north, Germanic tribes continue to raid the frontier. And in the south, a new force rises: Islam. In our world, the Arab conquests exploded across the Middle East and North Africa. They conquered Egypt, Syria, Persia. Then they crossed into Spain. But in this timeline, they face a united Roman Empire. When Arab armies invade Egypt in the 640s, they do not face a weak Byzantine province. They face the full military power of both the Eastern and Western Roman empires, now working together. The Romans still lose Syria. They still lose parts of Egypt. But North Africa never falls. Carthage remains Roman. The Western Mediterranean remains under Roman control. And because North Africa survives, the empire keeps its grain supply, its wealth, and its navy. That changes everything. Without Roman weakness in Spain, the Muslim armies never conquer Iberia. There is no Al-Andalus, no Reconquista. No centuries-long divide between Christian and Muslim Spain. Instead, Spain remains one of the richest Roman provinces. Córdoba becomes the second Rome of the West, a city of marble, libraries, and trade. And because the empire remains united, there is never a complete split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Great Schism never happens. Christianity remains centered under one enormous imperial church, a church controlled not by kings, but by Rome. By the year 800, Rome has survived for over 1,000 years. But then the north begins to burn. The Vikings arrive. In our timeline, Viking raids devastated England, France, and much of Europe because Europe was divided. There was no united force to stop them. But in this world, the Vikings do not raid weak kingdoms. They raid Rome. The first Viking fleets strike the coast of Gaul. They loot small towns and monasteries. For a few years, it seems unstoppable. Then the empire responds. The Roman navy is rebuilt. Huge fortresses are constructed along the Atlantic coast. Roman fire ships begin hunting Viking longboats. And in 843, something incredible happens. A Roman army lands in southern Denmark. For the first time in centuries, the empire expands. The Vikings are defeated, but not destroyed. Instead, many are absorbed into the empire, just like the Goths and Franks before them. Soon, there are Romanized Viking soldiers serving in the legions. By the year 900, Scandinavia is slowly becoming part of the Roman world. Because Rome never falls, the Middle Ages are completely different. There are no feudal kingdoms in France, no Holy Roman Empire, no separate England and France fighting the 100 Years' War. Instead, Western Europe becomes a patchwork of Roman provinces ruled by governors and generals. Latin remains the language of government. The local languages still develop, but they evolve differently. French, Spanish, and Italian sound far more similar because they never become fully separate cultures. The idea of France does not exist. The idea of Germany barely exists. People think of themselves as Romans first. By the year 1200, the Roman Empire stretches from Scotland to Morocco, from Portugal to the Balkans. It is no longer the ancient empire of Caesar. It is now something new, a medieval superstate. Its armies use steel armor and cavalry. Its cities are enormous. Its emperors rule from a massive palace in Milan. And then, from the Far East, comes the greatest threat Rome has ever faced: the Mongols. In our timeline, the Mongols smashed through Russia, Hungary, and Eastern Europe. There was almost nothing to stop them. But this time, Europe is not divided. When Mongol scouts arrive near the Danube in 1241, they do not find small kingdoms. They find Roman fortresses, Roman roads, Roman armies. For the first time in history, two of the greatest empires the world has ever seen stare at each other across a battlefield. The Mongols are faster. The Romans are richer. The war lasts nearly 20 years. Entire provinces are burned. Cities are destroyed. Millions die. But eventually, the Roman Empire wins. Not because it has better soldiers, but because it has something the Mongols do not: infrastructure. The Romans can move troops faster, rebuild forts faster, feed their armies longer. The Mongols can destroy a city. Rome can replace it. By 1263, the Mongols retreat. And from that moment on, nobody doubts Rome again. The empire has survived barbarians, plague, Vikings, and the Mongols. Now it begins to dream bigger. In our world, Christopher Columbus sailed for Spain in 1492. But in this timeline, there is no Spain. There is only Rome. Roman merchants have spent centuries sailing the Atlantic coast. Roman engineers build larger and larger ships. And in 1487, an explorer named Marcus Valerius leaves the port of Lusitania, modern Portugal. After weeks at sea, he sees land, a new continent. The Romans have discovered America. At first, the empire does not understand what it has found. It believes the new land may be part of Asia. But within decades, Roman colonies appear along the eastern coast of North America. New cities are founded. Nova Roma, Caesarea, Portus Magnus. Because Rome is already a giant empire, colonization happens very differently. There are no separate British, French, or Spanish colonies. There is one enormous Roman Atlantic province. The native peoples still resist. Wars still happen. Diseases still spread. But instead of 13 colonies becoming the United States, America slowly becomes Roman. By 1700, millions of Roman citizens live across the Atlantic. The Roman Empire now rules 2 continents. In our world, the Industrial Revolution began in Britain. But Britain does not exist in this timeline. Instead, industrialization begins in northern Italy and Gaul. Roman engineers have preserved far more ancient knowledge. Steam power is discovered earlier. Mechanical factories appear by the 1600s. By 1750, Milan is the largest city on Earth. Factories cover the countryside. Roman railroads connect Europe from Scotland to Egypt. The empire is richer than any civilization in history, but it is also becoming unstable. Because the larger Rome grows, the harder it becomes to control. The American provinces want more power. The provinces of Germania and Britannia demand independence. The old Roman aristocracy fights with industrial businessmen. Then, in 1789, revolution comes. Not in France, in Rome itself. For centuries, emperors ruled Rome. But now, ordinary people are angry. Bread is expensive. Taxes are crushing. The rich control everything. Crowds gather in Milan, then in Rome, then in Carthage. Soon, the empire explodes into chaos. Some want a republic. Some want democracy. Some want to keep the emperor. For 10 years, civil war tears the empire apart. At its worst, it seems Rome might finally die. But once again, it survives. A compromise is reached. The empire becomes a constitutional monarchy. The emperor remains, but his power is limited. A Roman Senate is elected. The provinces gain representation. Rome enters the modern age. And by the 1900s, it is the most powerful nation on Earth. So what would our world look like if the Western Roman Empire never fell? There would be no France, no Spain, no Germany, no United States. Instead, there would be one giant Roman civilization stretching across Europe, North Africa, and much of the Americas. People might still speak a form of Latin. The calendar, laws, architecture, and even politics would all be Roman. Washington, D.C. would not exist. There might instead be a city called Nova Roma on the Atlantic coast. Skyscrapers would stand beside giant marble temples. Roman senators would debate inside buildings inspired by the Forum. The Roman eagle would appear on every flag. And maybe, just maybe, humanity would already be on Mars. Because if Rome never fell, then perhaps the greatest thing it would preserve is not territory, but momentum. The momentum of civilization itself. The story of Rome is usually told as a warning that every empire falls, that corruption wins, that nothing lasts forever. But in this timeline, Rome proves something different. That civilizations do not die because history demands it. They die because they stop adapting. And in another world, perhaps Rome learned how. The empire did not fall. It changed. And because it changed, it conquered the future.